Howdy folks, this is Jay and welcome to Deep Dive, where we look inside the Figma files of some of the top designers in the world. Today with me, I have Laura, who's going to show us how the research team at General Motors uses Figma Make. Laura, stoked to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay.
Quick question before we even go further. Which is your favorite GM car? A dream one or your favorite one?
Oh, you didn't prep me for the question. I think a lyric. I love EVs, and Cadillac's an amazing brand.
Awesome. So Laura, can you show us how you and your research team use Figma Make?
Yeah, absolutely. So the example that I want to show you today is around how I actually wanted to give some feedback to a designer who was working on a schedule service flow. And after reviewing the concept, I had provided a little bit of written feedback in the Figma file. And I thought we weren't, I was having a hard time, conveying my recommendation to him. So I thought, hey, why don't I try to do something on Figma Make so I can actually visualize the recommendation? So in this case, we were looking at a service scheduling flow. So, you can go to the Buick website, you can type in your location. I'm in San Diego. And so I just went in and I grabbed a couple of screenshots of the experience and put them into a frame, right? So you can see here, you've got like a couple steps that you have to go through. And the point that I was trying to convey was, what if this was, a single screen and we had different conditional options that we wanted to display depending on whether the user could get service at their home, because we offer that now, or go to the dealer and get service done. So I grabbed a couple of the screenshots and I put them into a new file. And then I went into, let's try this. I grabbed those and I decided to send them to Figma Make, and they're loading up here. And then I, created let me give you a hack on this. So we've done this a couple of times where we've just created our own prompts out of the blue, right? And I think for people who've experimented using with AI, sometimes you prompt the AI to give you a better prompt, and then you actually put your prompt in and it nets you better outcomes. So I wasn't doing this, but actually a researcher on my team had started using we use Copilot at GM, and he started using Copilot to help him produce Figma Make prompts, which actually ended up saving him a ton of time. So let me go grab this here. I took my original prompt. It was a culmination of, feedback I had given to the designer in Figma, as well as, a general, like, I'm creating a prompt for Figma Make. And then I went to our Copilot and I put in my prompt just as is, didn't need to format it, and asked it to give me this, optimized version. Things that were important to me was that it preserved the Buick brand. I find that sometimes if you don't have the design system in Figma Make, it can make some of its own, decisions on what the design should look and feel like. And I really wanted it to, as best as it could, stick with, Buick's premium brand. And so Copilot really helped me probably create a better and more clear prompt than I would have been able to do myself. So just copy this. I don't need the follow-up questions. And then you just put this into your Figma Make, and let's see what happens.
And do is also like in the side by side, like what if there's someone lazy like me that does not want to go to Copilot and create this prompt and just directly tell Figma Make and not use Copilot, hey, create a scheduling screen. Maybe we can do that, experiment and compare the output side by side. Like you have output from using the Copilot prompt and then.
Yeah, I actually have that.
I want to visually see which one's better, which is more refined.
You want to see which one's better? Okay,
Yeah.
Let's do it. In my experience, when you do it with Copilot, it gets it right quicker than if you do it on your own. And I find that to be true with most AI tools. But yeah, let's do it. It'll be fun. As you can see, it's, working on it.
And another thing I picked up from your flow was, and this is, I feel like such a noob, that, and I feel like you're a pro because you directly selected all those like frames and directly just clicked on send them to Figma Make. I'm still a noob, but I'll go to Figma Make and manually like sometimes upload those screenshots.
I do that too.
Like I gotta be like a pro user like you.
Oh, yeah. I don't know that I call myself a pro, but anything that can save me time, it definitely helps. So, let's see. It's still working. Do you wanna see if it can multitask? And we'll do my first version? Okay, let's do that. So, grab the 3. Let's put it here. I'll get my original prompt. All right. Here we go.
Oh wait, this is the same Copilot one, or is it different
No,
one?
it's different. And you know what's
Oh,
interesting that I just noticed? Maybe it's because Copilot creates it in like a better format, but it has better spacing, and I wonder if it's gonna read it, in a little bit like clearer of a way. Like it's giving it steps to process, which is probably easier for the AI to handle than if you look at my original one, it's literally like a stream of consciousness.
yes. Yeah, it's just like I would say like I'm me just vomiting what I'm thinking on the screen to the AI.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's see. Did this have something? Okay. So here we go. It's interesting. It looks a lot like the current site. So I don't think that it captured, or maybe I didn't state it correctly, that I wanted this to be, in a single, like scrollable, single page flow. But I like to QC it. And again, here, like for research, and I won't say that this would apply for all designers, but for research, I don't need this to be perfect, right? It's not getting the right Buick logo. For me, I'm not creating high fidelity designs. What I'm trying to do is visualize a recommendation that would either be, in a slide deck or in a comment in Figma. So again, it doesn't have to be pixel perfect. It just has to get the point across. Let's see, oil change.
So in this case, real quick, since it did not give you the output that you wanted, like in terms of one page, how would you like troubleshoot this in Make? Would you then just talk to it, just type in the response, or actually go back to Copilot and refine the prompt from there?
Oh, no, from here, I mean, if it's pretty simple, like I would go through and QC it, right? Did it do what I wanted it to do? And so if you go back to, locate, so there's 2 things that it didn't really catch. One is, step 2 location options. One thing that's kind of like differentiated about this specific feature is that some services you can get at your home and some require you to drop them off at a dealer. And so I wanted, let's see, was I clear? Based on selected services, show location choices. Yeah, in this case, maybe myself or Copilot wasn't the clearest around for services. I think what's important is that when you are selecting something, you know immediately, if I want to get this done at my house, I can probably get an oil change and a battery check done at my house, but doubtful that I can actually get a tire rotation done at my house. So I would want to make that pretty clear at the get-go, right? Let's see. So if I do continue with that though, see, it's smart enough and it knows that that can only be done at the dealer drop off, right? But, I'd like for it to say that up front. So far I'm seeing, 2 things that I would want to change, but it's giving, it's pre-populating dealers, which is great. I can select and
Wow, this is amazing.
yeah,
And did you provide those dealer details in the prompt or
no,
it picked it up in the screenshot? Oh, wow.
display 3 options. It's interesting that it caught me being in San Diego. Don't know how it did that, but probably some location details. Yeah, no, it's great, right? Because again, it's providing realistic information, a lot of details that, again, I'm doing this to convey an idea, not to prescribe a, specific direction to the designer. So my feedback wouldn't be like, okay, update the dealer card so that it looks exactly like this. No, my point is, here's what I think the flow should be like. So, I'll go through, I'll QC, right?
Can you show me an example of how you do quality control and Make? I just want to see your process as a researcher, how you're going about it.
Yeah, so this is part of it. I'm going to go through the flow and make sure it's done basically what I want it to do. And then I'm going to tell it, I like to be nice to it. Thanks. Can you please update this so that the system flow is one page with progressive disclosure for each step. Additionally, for services that can be at home, please note that, and I don't, in this case, like, I don't care about getting the prompt completely right or detailed because, again, I'm conveying an idea. So however it notes it, I think that's probably okay. But we'll see. I don't know. That's where it's like a little bit of back and forth. So please note that in the first step. All right. I think that's good. I don't care about giving it as much context for the initial prompt here. I spend more time giving it as much context as possible because that's where I feel it'll go like a better first pass than if I just said, like combine this entire scheduling process into one page. I think another thing that's interesting too, though, is if you look at what I gave it, it was, well, that's how it found San Diego. It looked at the dealership, so that's how it got that. But I don't really give it much other than like the steps that it had here. So it made a lot of assumptions, but they were pretty accurate about the steps that you would need to go through to schedule a service appointment for your vehicle.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, the output.
Yeah. All right. So it's still thinking, but it's going to add indicators for home eligible services. I didn't even tell it what it was, but I had, confidence given the QC that I did that, okay, oil change and battery check, it knows you can do those at home or at a dealership. And then when I clicked on tire rotation, obviously that's something that can only be done at a dealership. So I think it's like the logic that I've seen, at least, and for my use case, is pretty sound.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what it comes up with. But this is really fascinating.
Yeah. All right. There it goes. I like too how it shows its reasoning, so you can kind of do like a check of like, okay, did it understand what I was telling it to do? It's got, well, I don't know. It's got some of it. So we're going to have to check it again, but it does. So one of the things that I wanted it to do was to note that some of these services are available at home. So it did that, but it's still doing the, stepper approach. So oh, I see what it did. I think it misunderstood me. So how is this going to work? Oh, okay. Interesting. It's doing what I want, but it's combining two interaction patterns that I don't know that I would agree with.
I wonder if we got to be specific and say remove the step tracker at the top and make it like the whole flow on one page.
Yeah. And then here, and like these tools aren't perfect, right? I've experimented with several AI tools at work and just personally because I'm interested in them. And, you definitely have to like learn the tips and tricks and have patience with it to get the final result where you want it.
I think the Make has that arrow on the bottom where I think you can select specific elements on the screen. So I wonder if we tried that and selected that tracker that you don't want, right? Like on this page at the top. And we just pinpoint and say, hey, get rid of the specific element. And then we just say, get rid of this and make it.
Do it.
Oh, yeah.
That's doing it.
Because I really like that the fact that they have like a pinpoint element, because sometimes like all these design elements have like a specific lingo. Some people call it step tracker. Some people call it progress indicator. So then I'm always like
Right.
confused, like, well, like what is the correct way to reference it? All right,
Right.
it's gone.
Right. Totally. Now it's gone. I think for this too, for the designer, just to kind of tie it up with a bow, I would ask for one like more global change. How would I word this? Okay, to finalize this, so for a design concept review, let's add a heading to indicate that for the owner is service. Also, these, how do I want to describe this? So basically, just for the concept, I want to add a header that this is for scheduling service. And then I'd like for it to, visually like communicate that there are more steps and it's not just this one screen.
I
Um,
see.
yeah, here it goes. Interesting. Okay. So it's like locked it. I don't know that I love that, but again, I'm going to send this to a designer to say, hey, the main thing that I want to communicate, and this is where like the friction came up, is that we had some business partners that wanted to promote a certain feature. And so that feature was raised higher up in the experience, which is, essentially like wanting to elevate the service where you can schedule at home. But the services that are available at home are only available for certain types of services. So, you know, we were getting into this debate of like, do you select the location first? Well, the location is dependent on the service that you want. And so my point was, can we communicate? Can we let the users tell us, what service they would want to have? Can we note which, and do like a small like nod to the service, right? That they can do it at home. So they're aware, but we're not making them go back and forth if they were to select a combination of two things. And at the end, they can only go to the dealership. So that was the goal of this flow.
What I like over here is that if you were to just leave some Figma comment to the designer, it's open for interpretation, what you just said, or you got to be very precise with the word. But now this is like something visual. When I see something like this as a designer, I'm like, oh, I see what Laura's trying to say. I get it. Everything being on one page.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's super interesting to me about these tools, right, is that researchers, our main like artifacts in communication is like language, written or verbal, right? We're either telling the story of our insights and feedback that we get from users or our point of view, right? So if we're doing, in this case, it was a heuristic evaluation and I'm giving design feedback, not necessarily from a study, but based on my expertise. And like you said, written feedback can be open for interpretation. Even verbal feedback can be. And it's funny, I work from home, I have a whiteboard, but I have this like, from Target sketch pad that I often bring out with my Sharpie and try to like jot down, what I'm trying to say visually or like take a photo, send it over Slack. And I think this has been a really exciting tool to experiment with to see if it gives us this like common denominator of communication and language, which is, visually communicating designs, right? So like, again, I'm not giving the designers a mandate, but this is just another way to communicate and I think it's more effective when you can communicate visually like that. But a lot of researchers aren't comfortable with wireframing. Like I'm not great in coming up with designs in Figma. Yeah.
A lot of researchers I worked with, they're not comfortable like going into Figma and designing or creating a prototype. So you think it's important for researchers to create like just something interactive using Make rather than just giving like slide decks with user feedback when they're trying to communicate their ideas and stuff?
Yeah, I think it depends, right? So I'm not saying like slide decks are dead and we won't be doing that anymore. I think that, you know, telling a compelling story of the research or your point of view is really important in a slide deck or, any kind of research artifact like a journey map or something of that nature. Photos from being in the field are really compelling. And I don't have a stat, but I think the majority of the time that's probably enough. But if you're getting into, design co-creation, if you're co-creating designs with your design partners, or let's say like after you present the research findings and then you're in a workshop or a design session with your design partners and you're trying to explain like, hey, here's an alternative way that I think we could do this, right? If you're not proficient in creating frames or flows in Figma, then putting something into Figma Make, tweaking it a little bit and saying, okay, here's actually my idea, and having that as an artifact to talk to and then guide them through, like, here's what I'm thinking, and then having that kind of back and forth conversation. Again, before Figma Make, I just, if I wasn't feeling like I was communicating my idea clear enough, I'd get out my notebook and just like start sketching out like stick figures and things like that. Like, I'm not a great artist either, but yeah. So I think it's helpful. I don't think it's something to be used all the time at all, but in the right moments and opportunities, I think this is huge for designers.
What was your designer's reaction when the first time you just send them a Figma Make prototype link? Were they shocked? Were they excited?
Yeah, I didn't just like throw it to them out of nowhere. Yeah, it was over Slack. We were going in a back and forth already, mostly like async digital. I think doing something like this live in a design session could be challenging because your attention is taken away from actually reviewing the work, right? You're pulling different frames and you're tweaking your prompts and then you're QCing. So this was all async, but there was a dialogue back and forth that started in Figma. Another thing too is like a lot of times Figma files are full of, a lot of different comments. So it can be hard to decipher, where did I go to see this comment and that comment? So the conversation occurred in Slack and we were going back and forth. And I said, hey, I'm going to just throw together a Figma Make prototype so that I can like illustrate this idea for you. So I already gave him a heads up that, hey, I think this could be really helpful, be on the lookout. I'm going to tweak it. And maybe this is a better way that I can just like, share my idea. And I did that. I wasn't with him, so I don't, he found it helpful because I ended up seeing those design changes, a design review or two later. So they definitely
Wow.
were taken in. And I think, again, just like visualizing it and making it easier to consume, visually what I was trying to communicate. And it wasn't like a massive change either, but it just helped outline like, hey, this is what I think could be helpful. And here's why. But I think that's the other side of it too. It's like, this isn't a directive, this is my recommendation to you. Here's my rationale behind it. I think it meets your business team objectives in what they're trying to achieve, right? While also creating a flow that's doesn't add as much friction as I think where we were going originally.
Gotcha. Now, we were trying to do this like live comparison of using side by side, yes, comparison of using Copilot to create the first prompt when using Figma Make versus just prompting by yourself, like just 100% human prompt. So let's see what the 100% human prompt generated and which output was better.
Well, it's not terribly, I mean, overall, it has the stepper at the top or the progress bar. It didn't really notate if the service needed to be done or it could be done at home or in the dealership. It has a description, which, so I would do the same thing. Okay, it did gray this out, which I think is, helpful, right? Some select services, but I would rather it do that up front here. So let's just see. We're going through that dealership. Okay. Using the same kind of dealers. So there's not a lot of, honestly, there wasn't too much difference. So, okay, here we go.
Not bad. Aside from a few visual alignment issues, it's not bad, I would say.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, the Buick logo, it definitely did not follow the brand as much. The vehicles in shop wasn't centered. Not sure what.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what that is. Versus in the Copilot one, I think you had specific instructions that follow the website brand guidelines and design standards.
Right, exactly. So this is a little cleaner up top.
Yes.
Yeah.
So visually, yes, this one is like way better right off. And as designers, like they would definitely care about this a lot more.
They would. I'd probably be taken more seriously with the Copilot version. But in terms of the interaction, though, it's pretty similar, right? It didn't include the notation of what service was available at your home or at a dealership, and then it's still doing this progress bar at the top. But, in the end, the design detail is definitely better, or was definitely better with Copilot.
Got it. Then I think, do you also use Make as a creative partner when you're creating like research artifacts, or have you tried doing that?
Yeah, we have. And I'll actually dive into an example from one of the researchers on my team. Context here is that one of his design teams that he was supporting, they're, updating one of our experiences and wanted, and like they're, redesigning it from the ground up. And they were having a conversation and a little bit of a debate around what's better, a horizontal or a vertical navigation. And so, this was a case where he did more of a point of view, right? Like when we want to think about horizontal versus vertical navigation, what factors should influence our decision? So, a lot of it was like, is it this or is it that? And research, like we really embrace the gray. Well, it could be vertical, it could be horizontal. It depends. It always depends, right? So he did a great job of going through, existing research. Nielsen Norman Group had, a lot of data that he pulled from. He also went in and did some competitive audits of, other sites that have horizontal versus vertical navigation. These are, B2B tools. So this is, something we were working on for us. And then he created, like a high level overview, right? So what, when would you want to use vertical? When would you want to use horizontal? And then he did a table showing the different use cases for horizontal versus vertical and some of the different, website types, right? And, this is comprehensive, but sometimes it can be hard to digest. So he decided to put this into Figma Make. And, he's actually the one that I learned the hack of, hey, put your Figma Make prompt into Copilot first. And so he actually, I think, went into more detail than I did. His prompt included like, use these emojis, here's the specific content. He had a pretty lengthy prompt that went with this. And so, what was great is that this is same content, or very similar content, but what it's much more digestible, it's much more scannable. And, again, going back to what we were talking about before with researchers not always being the most proficient in using Figma and, looking at spacing and color and things like that. He just gave it the content and he let it, take it and run with it. And this is something that, we can put into as a resource in our design system. Right? It has like a high enough fidelity that, not that these are okay, but this is just as additional visual polish that is really helpful when trying to convey a point.
That makes so much sense. This is amazing to see that this whole artifact here was actually generated in Make. So if we go to the Make project that generated this research artifact, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So you can see his prompt was, again, with Copilot, and I think he went back and forth a little bit with using Copilot, but he was really prescriptive with it, right? He had these, use these 3 categories. This is exactly what I want it to look like. It has that markdown formatting, which is much easier for an LLM to digest. He had given it really specific direction with the, emojis that he wanted to use. He gave it colors. So I think this is a really great example. If you want to have more control and predictability with the output from these tools, Figma Make and others, then you really have to set it up for success, right? So like garbage in, garbage out, if you can and you have the time, giving it more context, especially when you're asking it to create a visual artifact like you do in Figma Make. I think it's really helpful. But you can see here too, like he went back and forth with it, right? So, he's looking at it, he's tweaking it. He's making a little bit more adjustments on the content, right? So maybe he's even going back and saying, and again, I'm putting myself in his shoes, but he's like, let me, tweak this and tweak that based on this final asset, right? Because he's going from a table to something that's a little bit more scannable and digestible.
Yeah. So when you want to make tweaks to what he has done so far, do you just directly go and start prompting and making changes? Or do you just duplicate his project? What is like something you found effective hygiene wise?
Yeah. So, it's interesting because with this, I had another conversation with a different team. So he had done this project for one of our teams, and the group really latched on to this, and we saw a lot of use of using this framework for other teams. And so I had shown it to another design lead as like, hey, when you're trying to make decisions about horizontal, vertical, or even a hybrid navigation, or really anything. Like I think that my research team has been really diving into creating more guidance and framework type documents for our teams to leverage. They commented on, well, when you see this here that says use when, in their opinion, and he's not wrong, it's not always like that prescriptive, right? So the main feedback that I got was maybe you start with the benefits and the limitations. Like me as your stakeholder looking at this, I want to see benefits and limitations first. And maybe these are like considerations. So it's not a prescriptive use when, it's more of a consideration. So I don't want to mess with his file. He's using this. This is his. So if I want to make tweaks on my own, and I love this. This wasn't here when Figma Make first came out. And I know that, when I was using it and talking to other people, that was definitely a pain point for a lot of folks using Figma Make. But now that they've introduced this new feature, copy design, it's going to copy this asset here. It copied it to the clipboard. So I'm going to go to a new file and paste this in, right? So now it's standing on its own. Like I did before, grab it, put it back into Figma Make. It would be really nice if you could just like create a duplicate Figma Make and kind of like branch off of it. I don't think you can do that. Maybe if
Oh, I
so, I'm not
think
aware.
I was gonna say if you go to that project right there that your researcher created in this one, in that drop down on the file name, what if you duplicated it from the top?
Oh,
Like not there, either that or underneath the navigation name or
I can duplicate it. Now you've taught me something. I was just so excited with the copy feature that I'm like, oh, great. You could finally copy the design and you can put it into a frame. And now you taught me something. So, okay, cool. Let's go back to this. So yeah, then I can go in, I'm not touching his file. And I can say, move the use when sections to the bottom in each column below. I find when I'm giving it like really precise feedback, I want to be as specific as I can. So like take use when section, move it to the bottom below benefits and limitations. I find that works a little bit better. And then change use when to considerations. Sometimes I feel like it can take some liberties too on like changing color or other design elements. So one of my other tips is this is the only change that I want you to make. Do not change anything else.
oh wow.
I've seen some people like capitalize this too, like do not. I don't know if that makes a difference, but that's all I wanted to do is move use when to the bottom. So we'll see. And it's confirming it's going to do that. So at this point, like I feel like it's gonna do what I ask.
So I think the capitalization made all the difference. Loud and clear.
Yeah. So yeah, benefits, limitations, which I think is good, right? Like you want to start out with why would you do this one versus that, or the hybrid approach? What are the limitations? What are considerations? For additional readability, you could also have limitations be aligned on the grid and considerations be aligned as well. I think like for this, it's good, right? But you can continue to tweak it like that.
So in closing, what is one feature that you are excitedly awaiting from the Figma Make team? Or if there's one feature you could request them, what would you ask them?
I think, and this is not unique to Figma Make, but improving the visual output is definitely something that I think that could obviously be enhanced. I don't know, like for my use case, I'm okay with where it is now because I'm not looking for like pixel perfection. I'm not launching designs. I'm not going to be creating anything that I would want to directly ship. So I think if you were to ask a designer who's probably trying to use Figma Make for higher fidelity work, potentially, they'd probably have a lot more requests. For me and, even other designers that I've either, talked to or listened to on podcasts or other things, like I think people are starting to see this as a really great concepting and prototyping tool. You can quickly spin something up and then get feedback from, others or even put this into research. I think there's a couple of research use cases that I'm excited to try out that we haven't done yet on a team. This is still a pretty new feature, but, two use cases that I think could be really cool is, one is around doing co-creation studies with users. So, for me, like pre-COVID days, you could cut out, different pieces of the experience and you'd, have a big table with a lot of like different nav patterns or different CTAs, and you'd actually like have a researcher and a user co-create and stitch together a design from a bunch of components. With post-COVID, we were doing a lot more of that in tools like, FigJam or other whiteboarding tools. I would love to see us either do a hybrid study where you're doing co-creation on like FigJam and you're pulling those, pieces together. But then it would be really neat to put the output of that, co-creation or co-designing session with a user or participatory design session into Figma Make, and then have, you as the researcher with your participants going through like tweaking the design together. I think that could be so powerful. Again, we haven't done this, but we're definitely talking about, the right study type and the right feedback to try this, because you don't need to do, those types of studies with like, they're a unique study that only applies to specific use cases, but I think that could be cool. Another one that I see adding a lot of like, efficiency for research and design teams is when you're doing write testing. So rapid iteration testing and evaluation. So essentially, you're doing a week long or five, the tried and true method is 5 days of studies. First day is research, second day is redesign, third day is research, fourth day redesign, and then fifth day you're like finalizing the design. And these are really grueling sessions, right? Like the team is highly invested. When you're testing, you're coming up with ideas. When you're doing those testing days and then those non-testing days, like you can be very heads down trying to tweak the design. I think, using something like Figma Make to quickly iterate on those designs, maybe you spend a half day or less doing the redesign work and, I don't know, either clear your head and get, like have a coffee, take a break, or maybe you do the right study in a shorter period of time, right? So instead of 5 days, maybe it's 4. So those are two research use cases that I think are really exciting that we really haven't tapped into yet.
Thank you so much, Laura, for coming on Deep Dive and showing us how to use Figma Make.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Hey folks, this is Jay. It means the world to me that you watch this video. Let me know in the comments what topics you want me to cover in the future, and I will see you in the next deep dive.